Joining me today on Brief Encounters is Patty Corrie, Legal Operations Manager at Aspen Aerogels. Patty helps legal teams work smarter through tech, process, and content that makes complex systems click. She's worked across legal ops, CLM rollouts, and AI strategy, always with a focus on what's actually useful in practice. We're delighted to have you here, Patty. Welcome to Brief Encounters.
Thank you for having me. This is my first podcast, so I'm thrilled to be here.
And we're greatly honored to have you as your first appearance on the podcast scene. You've been working in legal ops for a while now, and it's kind of taken on meaning of its own, legal ops these days. But how do you think about that legal operations role, and kind of what is important? What are the core responsibilities that you have?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question because it can mean many different things to many different people. But for me, I think from a holistic perspective, legal ops is the bridge between, I think, business, law, and technology, and helping people work better across functions, right? So you're helping attorneys do their jobs more easily to interact with the business. So that's kind of an overview. But I think the core responsibilities, I like to think of them in three buckets. So contract negotiation, so someone who has a background in doing attorney level work, which is really where I started. That was my bread and butter. The second bucket is, the process implementation and tech experience, because you have to be able to understand, process, to be able to implement technology and working across functions to do that. And then the third bucket is the business experience of being able to budget and forecast legal spend, because legal spend is how you're going to articulate which monies are directly impacting business priorities. So then we can articulate legal not as a cost center, but as a strategic partner.
Awesome. And it's a role which has kind of evolved quite a lot since we started talking about legal ops. And what have you seen in your career? I mean, how is that role of legal operations changing?
I think it's not just being someone who is really good at technology. It's also the human element to legal operations. In many ways, legal operations is a relationship and trust business. And to get anyone to change a process, you have to have good relationships with people. So you can be amazing at technology and being able to build prompts if you're talking about AI, but if no one is going to listen to you or trust you, then it's almost pointless. So I think now it's turning into more of this emotional human component that someone needs to have in that role.
Very, very interesting. Implementation of tech is something we think about a lot. And on the vendor side, we spend a lot of time building technology, but we know that the hardest thing is actually to get that tool adopted within your business. And I think you've recently been implementing tools at Aspen. Tell us a little bit about how do you go about that whole process from selection through to implementation?
Yeah, so first, I think you have to understand the pain points in your legal department that you want to solve with a generative AI focused legal tool. So I really focused with what are our pain points that we're trying to solve, and then what tools really solve them. So it's really taking a look at the overall picture of, what are the problems and pain points that we have. So for example, if it's reducing outside counsel spend or trying to automate and automate certain tasks that are repeatable and high volume, you have to ask those questions first before you even think about implementing a tool. I like to say, if you can't articulate the why, then you're not ready for Gen AI. That is my mantra. And I hope others will relate to that you need to understand the problems and pain points first, and then you move towards selection.
It's very, very cool. I mean, we often hear of people buying Gen AI tools and then kind of back reasoning into a problem. It sounds like you're doing the opposite, which makes a ton of sense. How do you go about articulating those problems? I'm imagining folks in the legal team maybe have different opinions, different business teams may feel things like, how do you actually kind of unpack that and figure out what really matters there?
I like to go back to a definition of strategy that I learned in my MBA course with Professor Cumey. He's at Suffolk University Sawyer Business School. I just graduated there this past May. And we took the strategy class, and he first asked, what is strategy? Right? And so let me ask you, what do you think strategy is?
Gosh, big question. So I would say strategy is about how you realize a vision. What would you say?
So that is the answer that we gave at the beginning of the semester. And towards the end of the semester, we realized that strategy is data, connection, and creativity integrated to be able to solve a unique problem that is either short term or long term, right? So when I thought about, okay, how are we going to use Gen AI? We know we want to experiment. We know we have certain problems. What is that? So I started looking at, okay, data. Let me go back to the systems that we have. So our CLM tool, our legal spend tool, seeing, okay, are we having a lot of contracts that are going to attorneys that they need to be able to have a redlining tool to be able to do that quicker, right? So that's one way to use it. If we're going into our legal tracker spend tool, right? Can we isolate, let's say the top 5 matters that we have the most spend, and what questions are we asking these law firms? Are they the same questions? Can they be repeated? Can we use Gen AI for that, right? And then the creativity piece is, I think, pulling back the stories of going to your attorneys and having discussions about what is on your desk, what is coming across, what projects do you have? How can Gen AI be able to help you not, just take a first cut or a first look at something, but be a thought partner to you, to be a very judicious intern. So I took the strategy lesson that I learned from my world-class strategies class really to heart when I started thinking about implementing legal generative AI.
Very interesting. And if you've kind of got that problem set now fully identified, and you kind of have a plan and you have a strategy of how you want to solve those, then you start looking at the tooling. And for folks out there who are evaluating Gen AI tooling generally for legal, like what are the kind of questions that they should be asking vendors, and what should they really be thinking about in the solution space?
So in the solution space, I think first understanding what are their top use cases and do they know them, right? So if they can't articulate to you what problem they're really trying to solve or the market that they're trying to serve, then that is a huge red flag to me, because what it says to me is that the vendor probably created something that is a wrapper, right? It's not, you know, their own LLM, but it's a wrapper on top of it, just rebranded, right? And they're just thinking about, okay, we want to just sell this, and maybe there's not a clear use case yet, and they're figuring it out in real time, like the rest of us are. That's a red flag to me, because I want to understand, do you understand who you're trying to serve, and is it me? So that's like the first question that I would ask. I also would ask, are they going to offer any prompt engineering courses or support post implementation? Because it's one thing buying it, but you have to be able to have support on the other end, right? So are they going to be able to provide you AI prompting classes? Do they have pre-built templates and prompts for you? Because then you can take those and really make them your own rather than starting from scratch. So those are some of the questions I would start thinking about when you're going to be interfacing with these vendors.
It's really interesting, that implementation angle as well, where again, thinking beyond the purchase of the tech, how do you actually get it adopted? What are some examples of like really great things that you've seen in the vendors that you've purchased, in terms of whether that's prompt libraries or whatever it may be? Like, what's really made a difference to you guys?
The support. So I think prompt classes, like prompt engineering classes, and are they communicating their features and updates and their roadmap to their customers? It was very important to me to have that collaborative relationship. I didn't want it to be where we bought the tool and I don't hear from them again until the renewal, or they're not active enough in terms of telling me what are they planning, down the road, and does it align with the things that we need in the future, because you want the tool to be able to grow with you. So for example, if the tool doesn't have, like, let's say, a word plugin yet for redlining, is it on their roadmap? Right. So the tool that we ended up buying didn't have it, but it was on their roadmap. And I was like, okay, that's a secondary concern for us right now. We still are able to redline, but we want the word plugin soon, which was rolled out recently. So that is one thing for me that was really important, was that training aspect. And do they have a prompt library? Because you don't want to have to do all of this work without any help. So do they have, robust prompts, and are they continuing to update that library with new use cases that they're seeing from their customers?
So that's something we get really interested in the contract review space is playbooks as well. So playbooks. What did you got out of interest? Like, were you in a state in the company where you kind of already had that playbook ready to go and you could just upload it, or did you have to kind of collaborate with the vendor? Like, how did you go about like figuring out what is a good AI playbook?
We already had a playbook. It was something that we wanted to work on because we wanted a legal exceptions list really for our procurement team to be able to, tackle commercial provisions on their own and then escalate things to legal. So that was very much like a CLM focused project, but it really served us because then we could take the playbook and then upload it into the generative AI tool. And then we have a custom prompt that I was able to create that augments, that data that we're uploading. So I kind of already did that work like up front. But I think that even if you don't have a playbook starting out when you're thinking about using generative AI, that's okay. Just get a minimum viable playbook together. So, like a minimum viable product, it's the same thing. Try to get something rough cut, upload it, and then iterate from there because we learn all the time something new that we should be updating our playbook on based on standards that we're finding through using the tool. So that shouldn't discourage anyone if you have to do a little bit of collaboration. Just rough cut it and get it in there.
And it's something that we lawyers aren't always great at, which is starting really small. So I remember when I was in practice, we would have playbooks that were sort of 30-page MS Word documents with a sort of horizontal format and one of those really, really heavy tables, like super thorough. But actually you can get quite far with just the one pager, right? And get going with it.
Oh yeah, and Excel. We use Excel for our playbook, and there's actually a template that I've used from Contract Nerds. They had a couple of playbook webinars, and I found this maybe a year or so ago. And so this was like the playbook template that I used, and I actually did a post on this of, hey, like people were asking me all about this playbook. Here it is, and it was like 30 attorneys from this random webinar I was a part of when I mentioned it wanted me to email it to them. So it's something I also could provide in the show notes if you would like.
And that would be fantastic. And a really interesting example of kind of peer learning and the importance of community in this, right? Because at the end of we're all learning about this new world.
Yeah, that's like another thing that with community, you have to be able to build a network to talk about this kind of stuff because it's so new. And we still don't understand, all of the use cases that we can be able to use generative AI for. How do you set yourself up for success? So community is also a huge part in this when we're thinking about using this tool.
And Patty, you've written quite a bit for the community. One of the posts you wrote recently had a lot of traction, really resonated with me. And you wrote about this thing that you call the AI shame spiral in legal. What did you mean by
What I was seeing the past couple of weeks, and I think I saw it over a few months as well, but I guess I just got fed up with it, or I just saw more of the same post. But it was kind of posts saying that if you use AI, then it means you're inauthentic and you're taking shortcuts. But if you don't use it, it means you're irrelevant and you're going to be left behind and your job is going to be taken. So I was very interested in that because it's this push pull that's going on, this friction, which part of me understands it, but part of me also doesn't because it's very much displaced. If we think about the legal AI market in terms of business, right? And we have the S curve of innovation, right? So here's like the S curve, and it's showing, okay, where are we growing in the market and where are we? We're probably in like stage 2, which is very early. So that is the early disruption and adoption phase. So right now we have some early movers who have competitive advantage in the space, right? We have some tools that are becoming cost leaders. So they're going to operate based on cost. And there's also others that are making premium plays, of course. We have the market starting to shape up in terms of who they're serving. So the segmentation of the market, so mid-market, enterprise level, smaller team tools, right? It's it's too early to tell if we're behind. I think we're right on time to think about how to use generative AI because the market it's just disrupted. We're not at a point where there's a maturity model. So to say that we're behind, it's so displaced, and I really think it's dishonest to say it. It's just we're right on time to figure this out. together.
And there's so much being written on each side of that argument. It's often hard to know kind of where to land. But I suppose the important thing is that you just need to have a curiosity about it, and to learn, and to try things out. And you guys are doing a lot of that already.
It's experimentation, I think, ultimately, and not allowing yourself to get so wrapped up in being perfect that it's progress over perfection. You don't have to have it all figured out. It's just you have to start somewhere and try. And that's first figuring out what are your pain points, and then backing up into like your data that I kind of went through, like what data can you pull that identifies those pain points? Who can you talk to in your team that can tell you their work sites, so that you can use generative AI to help them do their jobs easier. So I think it's all about experimenting at this point.
And for those teams out there who don't yet have legal ops, but are going through this challenge of needing to experiment and innovate on how they operate, how can legal ops help specifically, and what role do you see legal ops having in the next few years of this kind of innovative world?
Legal ops, I think I explained it in the beginning. I think we're the bridge, between law, business, and technology. So I find us as we are the translators. So you tell us what you need, and we try to translate it into the tool. And I find that's something I'm doing every single day, is hearing what someone is working on, what they're doing, how can I make a process and leverage technology to be able to make their lives easier, and to be able to reduce the amount of time that they're spending on certain tasks that they shouldn't, or to give them a thought partner, right? Especially for small teams, right? We're doing so much with so little that, generative AI is going to be able to help bridge that gap when you think about, larger teams having more resources. So I think we're the translator, and definitely the experimenter of having to try on new things.
And it sounds like you're in a relatively small team at the moment, if I understood. What are the differences? I saw you worked at Schneider and have had experiences of different types of companies, but what's it like being in that small team? What's the differences between that and a large legal team and in a large corporate?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of differences, but I think you're able to have a clear understanding of what everyone does because the team is a little bit smaller. So those who are on small teams, you have I think an incredible advantage to make an impact, and very quickly, because if you have 9, 10, 15 people on a team, you can go to each person and talk to them and understand exactly like what they're doing. And if you're talking to those people regularly, you're building trust. So then adoption is easier. But if you're working, in a legal ops team where maybe there's like 10 people and then it's like 100 people legal team, it's a little harder to get people on board with things and change, especially if you work at a legacy company. Like, Schneider, GE, if we think about those types of companies, I'm sure, at least from my experience, change was just harder because there were more legacy systems that were involved. So when a new tool comes in, it feels more shocking. Even when I was there with the CLM implementation I was a part of, that was my experience as well. Versus, when I implemented our CLM tool here. So I think you have an incredible advantage if you work in a small team.
And what are the biggest opportunities right now for legal teams who, I guess every CFO is telling legal to do more with less, and we kind of hear this phrase a lot. But what are really the opportunities for automation that you see?
If we think about it in two ways, so like we can touch upon like generative AI, but also like CLM. So I think smart triaging, making sure that correct contracts are going to the right people and that those processes are very much built out. So having that clean, I think, approval workflow is very important. So there's no bottlenecks. So I think that's like really one opportunity. The minimum viable playbook, I think, is also an incredible opportunity for generative AI, because once you get that in there, you can upload it into your generative AI tool, make a custom prompt, and then you can start redlining against it immediately. Once you take, a few hours of time, 4 or 5 hours, really sit with your attorneys, learn what is in their head and document it, you can be able to speed up the process, say, quite quickly. And then you can learn from the tool if you need to change any of your standards. So you're also able to iterate and tweak what provisions that you've been negotiating, and is there ways to negotiate them better. So I think that's another opportunity. Another opportunity is for self-service as well. So if your attorneys are still reviewing tons of NDAs, that's also a huge opportunity to be able to automate those and maybe lower value vendor contracts as well. And being able to set up a legal exceptions list, so then your attorneys are only getting the things that should be escalated to legal. So I think those are the 3 buckets that I like to think about.
It's really interesting, and it's almost like a common theme there of like preserving attorney time for the higher value work, the things that are an exception or the things that are going to move the needle.
Yes. Yeah, it's protecting attorney time, and I'm very protective over them. That's why I say my attorneys, because I very much hold it. That's my job, is to protect their time. So then they are doing the valuable work that they went to school for, right? And then my job is to build out those processes so they can do that.
Final question as we're coming to time. What are your top 3 tips for legal teams who are trying to get their heads around AI, trying to adopt AI? What would you recommend?
First, take the pressure off of yourself. You don't have to be perfect. So your legal ops team doesn't need to be perfect, or your attorneys to be able to use it. It's progress over perfection is what is going to get us there, I think. 2, don't be afraid to experiment. It's all about figuring out what prompts are going to work for you and the outputs. As we know, generative AI is not deterministic. So there's going to be some probability in variable answers. So just experiment as much as you can to then find the prompts that are going to work for you. And I think I just have a little bit of fun. This is also an incredible time, I think, in legal tech, to be a part of an industry that is in this disruption. So this is also a very exciting time. So there shouldn't be, I think, any pressure to get to a certain place. As long as you're in the game, that is what matters.
Awesome. Patty, where can folks learn more about you and follow the writing that you're doing on social media and elsewhere?
So LinkedIn. So at Patrizia Patty Corey, MBA. That's my LinkedIn. So I'll plug that. Also, I do write a column for Contract Nerds, which is another media platform all for everything contracts and contract management. So if you also want some tips when it comes to clearing out your messy repository and all my opinions on CLM implementation, that'll also be there.
Awesome. Patty Corey, thank you so much for being on Brief Encounters.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm just so thrilled about this. Thank you.